Hello and welcome back to another video tutorial here at Geekatplay Studios. My name is Gary Miller. I'd like to return to the UV paint and texturing tools that Hexagon has and explore them a little bit further. If you have not seen my tutorial on modeling a tree stump, I would encourage you to start there and look at those tutorials and get an understanding on UV mapping and how the whole process works. Once you get familiar with that, then this tutorial will make a little bit more sense because I'm not going to go into the same level of detail as I did in the tree stump modeling tutorial. But in this tutorial I want to create a very simple model and we're going to explore some of the features of the UV function in Hexagon that we've not looked at before. In addition to that, in the very basic model that we're going to be making, we're going to be, or at least I'm going to be, using some tools and approaches that I've not used in any of my other tutorials. So you might be able to see some tools that you have not used before and might be able to benefit from this. So I want to create a box, the cardboard kind of box that you load up with a bunch of junk and send off to grandma for her birthday or something. And I'm going to speed through this modeling portion of this tutorial so I can focus more on the UV texturing aspect. So I'm going to select the top of my model, come up here to my Vertex Modeling tabs, click on my second tessellation tool. I just want to create a slice right down the middle, validate that. I'm going to select this top face. I'm going to come over here to disassociate. I'm going to run up here to my set pivot point. I'm going to set the pivot point right there, and I'm just going to pivot my box flap open. Now notice in my scene tree I have only one object in my viewport, perspective view. I have one model, and yet look at what happens when I move my box flap around. I've got, at least it appears, two objects. I really don't. What the disassociate tool does is it disassociates the part of the model that you have chosen from the rest of the model. It's still one piece, but well, think about it this way. The geometry of the box lid has been disassociated or disconnected from the geometry of the rest of the box. I'm going to select the other one and disassociate that. I'm going to set its pivot point right there. Set its pivot point right there. I'm going to flip that one open. Now I'm going to come up here to select points. I'm going to select these 2 points right here that were created when I tessellated the top of my box. It left those 2 points behind. I don't want them, so I'm going to select both of them and hit my backspace key. Now I'm going to reset my pivot point. I'm going to come up here to select edges, select those 2 edges. I'm going to use my fast extrude tool, and now I'm just going to extrude inwards along my x-axis to a thickness or a length that I think is appropriate for the little box flaps. That looks good. I'm going to select that one, disassociate, set my pivot point there, and we'll make this one real flat. Set that, disassociate, and there we go. Alright, now this is our box that we can load up with our finished box. We can load up with a bunch of goodies and send off to grandma for her birthday or for holidays. Alright, now let's jump into UV painting and editing. If you recall what I mentioned in my tree stump tutorial, With these projection settings, look at the basic construction, the basic shape or form of your model, and that's usually a good place to begin with selecting a projection mode. In my case here with this box, I'm going to go with cubic projection. And it starts us off with this checkerboard pattern. And this checkerboard pattern is called a texture checker. Many different UV programs have this, and it is an indispensable feature. What it shows you, and its purpose is to show you the arrangement and the scale of your UV map. I'm going to switch to a split screen view here, and I will show you a little bit more. Let me change the colors of my UV map. I'll change it to a bright green. That should stand out. Okay. Over here in the UV view, the material, the texture checker, is a perfect checkerboard pattern, but the way it's projected here on my box, it's stretched. Well, that is the purpose of this pattern that View offers, so that you can see the scale and the arrangement of your UV map. So with my cube projection, what I want to do is I want to scale it down so that it is not stretched. And there we go. And now I'm going to spin around to the other side, and I'm going to scale this down along the z-axis. And notice, even though I'm scaling it along the z-axis, it's not changing along the x-axis. And if I needed to, I could also make some adjustments along the y-axis as well. And that's the unique feature of this cubic projection mode. It allows you to scale the dimensions of your texture as well as position your texture in along three different axes to fit the shape of your object. And that's why I started off with using a cubic projection. And that looks pretty good. The bottom, well, I can't do anything with the bottom because it will change the scale of the sides of my box. So this will have to be it for now. I'm going to go ahead and validate that. And let me move this over. Come up here to edges, select all those. Now I'm just going to scale them down so they fit within the perimeter of my UV map. And there we are. Okay. Now these box tops, these flaps on the box, they obviously are not to the same scale as the sides of the box, and we can clean that up later. That is not a problem, not at all. Okay, so let's change this to a real texture. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to name that box. And by the way, if you ever want to, if you're texturing your object and you want to go back to the texture checker under your tab here, it's located right down here at the bottom. You can always revert back to it. But for right now, we're going to choose a real texture, and that's the one I want. Okay, this is my texture. Now let me open this up and show you what it looks like when I created it in Photoshop. This texture is almost like a notebook piece of notebook paper, much higher than it is wider. And in Photoshop, I took just a round hard brush and I created all these circles in the texture. Now when we come into hexagon, you see that the texture does not look like it did when we just viewed it a moment ago. And that is because hexagon only displays your textures in a square manner. In fact, if you come over here and you click on your texture tab, you notice the options that are available to you are all square. So what hexagon did is it took my, like my 4x3 texture, and it compressed it to fit within the confines of this square. As a result, I don't have those circles anymore. I have ovals. So we've just started out with our UVing, and we've already got a handicap, one strike against us. So let's come over here and see how it has displayed our texture onto our box. Well, actually the box flaps don't look bad at all, and if you recall, they did not look good on the texture checker, but over here it looks pretty good. So we're lucky there, but on the sides of the box you see it's shaped like our circles no longer exist, now they're ovals. And that's not a problem. Let's just come up here to points. I'm going to select all my points, and I'm just going to stretch this out. Now because it overlaps and extends beyond the edge of my texture, now I've just got to scale it back down. And let's scale it back. Let me do this, scale it in, and then scale it back up. There we are. You can almost do this in real time. Watch what happens here. Because I chose points, notice that you almost get a real-time update. If I chose faces, whatever changes I make to here you can't see because they're highlighted in red, and you'd have to deselect and then reselect and then deselect every time. So choosing points or edges helps enable you to see your results much quicker over here on this side. Okay, well now the texture looks a lot better. And I realize this is a paper bag texture. I just didn't have one on hand of a cardboard box. But the point was to show the what hexagon does when you import a non-square texture. Now let's look at the box lid. I'm just the flaps here. It doesn't have the same appearance as the bottom down here. So that tells me that just like when we were using our texture checker, this one has been stretched. So I'm going to come over here and look at where this UV map is for this face, and just see what happens if I stretch it this way. Notice what happens here in the real-time, almost real-time feedback. So look at that. We fixed it very easily. So what I'm going to do is grab this one also, and let's stretch them. Oops. This is going to be a little bit tricky. I'll select that one. Now I don't have to worry about selecting the wrong one. Okay, now let's see what happens if there we are. And let's spin around. And that one looks good. Guess it could come down. There we are. And I'm not going to worry about the rest of this because I want to move on to another example. But that is playing around with the texturing features and manipulating the UV features, the UV map. Well, I'm going to change textures to something a little bit more complicated. And let me open this up here and show you what this one looks like. I created this texture in Photoshop for the express purpose of creating an image with very different sides or different locations, because I want to be able to demonstrate how you can pick and choose what part of this texture will appear on any part of your model. So let's come over here to projection mode, and I'm going to reproject my cubic projector on it again. Now it has retained the dimensions of the last cubic projection that I made on it, and that's fine. What I want to focus on though are these three buttons up here and show you what they do. So I'm going to grab my edges here, and I'm going to change their color so they're a little bit more visible against all this white background. And I'm going to come up here and do my cubic projection. There we are. Okay, this first one, I know this video does not show this, but if I hover my mouse over it, it says each cube face overlaps each other in the UV space. All that is telling us is that all of these faces for my cube, they all just overlap one another. And if you look, when I select one on the object, you see it's where it has been selected on my UV map. So that's showing you the orientation of your UV map. It's just kind of very messily just laid them one on top of the other here in our UV map. And that works. There's nothing wrong with it. Let me enable projection again. Let's click on our second one. And this one, when I hover over it with my mouse, it says only opposite cube faces overlap each other in the UV space. Well, let's see what this one does. I'm going to validate that. Okay, if I select these two faces here, and I select these two faces, what the tool has done is opposite faces are overlapping one another on our texture. And I'll select those two, and I'll select those two. And as you see here, yes, they are overlapping. The bottom one here, this other one, that's the bottom. He's a lone maverick. He's out on his own. So with the way it starts off orienting your UV map, if you want opposite sides of your object to share the same texture and area of your texture, then just choose one and place it directly over the other. Now both of them will share exactly the same location on my texture, and as a result be mapped identically. And I could do the same thing with the sides. The bottom of this, I'm going to choose edges because you'll be able to see easier. The bottom, it will reflect whatever part of the texture that it lands on when I am done moving it. And that's such a neat thing about UV mapping. I can display exactly what part of the texture I want to be displayed on any part of my model. It allows for a tremendous amount of flexibility in doing that. And I can scale it up if I want it to be larger. I can scale it up. I can, if I select the edges correctly, I can scale the whole thing to fit the entire dimensions of my UV map. Something like that. And I can have the whole thing displayed in there. So your UV map function here in Hexagon is pretty good. Okay, I want to explain the third one. And the third one is a particular feature I like. It's my particular favorite. And when I hover over it with my mouse, it says each cube face has its own UV space. I'm going to go ahead and press that. And all that means is that each face of my model has its own particular location here in my UV map. And I like this function the most because it allows me right off the bat, right at the beginning of mapping this, it allows me to place these wherever I want, and it allows me to easily find them because none of them are overlapping. That's just my preference. Alright, I want to do one thing and then we will finish this tutorial. I'm going to hide this face here for the sake of making this a little easier. I'm going to move this one out of the way. There we are. Okay, this face here, it's an upside down and backwards number 6. And unfortunately, Hexagon does not allow for, at least not to my knowledge, doesn't allow to change the orientation of your map. Instead, you have to change the orientation of your UV map. So I can't change the orientation of my texture. I have to change my UV map. Well, I want this face to display my number 6, but not upside down and reversed. So here are my options. I will take it and rotate it around 180 degrees. Let's see what we've got. Well, it's a number 6 now, but unfortunately it is reversed. So I will come up here to my select edges. I will select that edge and watch what I do. I'm going to move it right over to the other side, select it, and now I'm going to pop it back where I want it to be, and let me click off of it and watch what happens here. There is my number 6. So all I've done is take this face of my model and I have reversed it and forced Hexagon to display the texture on this particular face of my model exactly how I want. And that's really what successful modeling and texturing is about. It's making the program do what you want it to do. It's understanding how it works, its strengths and its limitations, working around them and working through them to make the program do what you want it to do. After all, you paid for it, so it's best to understand it and put it to its maximum usage. So that's all for this tutorial. I hope you got a better understanding of UV mapping and texturing and just playing around with the different tools and possibilities that Hexagon has. So thanks for watching here at Geekatplay Studios. My name's Gary Miller. Have a good day.